Time once again for Perspectives, and Asima Silva, your host as always, as we are live from the beautiful WCCA TV studios in downtown Worcester. And Asima, on Perspectives, you really bring us all around the world, issues that are happening everywhere. Today, I think that what we're going to show is that you can have a local voice, stay active, and have a global impact, have an impact on things that are happening all around the world. And that is our guest today with Susan Serpa. And Susan, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I'm very happy to be here.
I think I'll kick it off just because it is hard not to notice. That is a big pin that you have on, and it says, "Keep the oath." What does that refer to?
Well, that refers to all elected officials take an oath to the United States Constitution. However, they don't always understand what that means. And it's a reminder that they are to obey the Constitution of the United States of America.
I have to, I was just going to say, so the pin is big. You are somebody who, it's interesting, is not adverse to a bold statement, shall I say. And I think that a lot of people certainly know Susan from, if not your voice, but from seeing you at city council meetings. There's a whole lot of people who watch that Tuesday night city council meeting. You probably have like a whole fan club because you were one of those who would sit in the front row and keep a silent vigil, silent protest. You wanted to keep the heat on, and it really was about keeping the oath.
That's correct. We got started with protesting the NDAA 2012, and that was a congressional, they voted in the NDAA 2012 with offensive statements in sections 1021, 1022 that gave the president, any president, not the current president, but all future presidents, the right to detain anyone indefinitely without any due process and secret evidence. Now, that's against the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Now, the problem was, even though it's a federal issue, the Supreme Court would not hear it because the ACLU had brought it before the Supreme Court with Chris Hedges and Dan Ellsberg, and they could not provide a plaintiff. Well, how can you provide a plaintiff when the whole thing is written with secret evidence and detained indefinitely? There may or may not have been a plaintiff. We don't know. So the Supreme Court did not hear it and would not rule on the NDA 2012. There was a bipartisan bill in Congress to throw out those sections, the offensive sections against the Fifth Amendment, and it was narrowly defeated. So we have the judicial branch failed us. We have three branches in the federal government. Beyond those three branches, where are you going to go? The judicial branch failed us because they would not hear it. The executive branch failed us because it was signed into law under President Obama. And he did do a signing statement promising not to use those sections because they were too dangerous. But that's not good enough because he passed it on to the current president, President Trump. And as we know, he's already talking about rounding people up. The congressional, the legislative branch also failed us. Executive, judicial, and legislative. Where are you going to go? When all three branches of the federal government failed our most basic rights to due process. A lot of people love free speech, and I love it too. But due process, don't have due process, you got nothing. You have no liberty whatsoever. You may as well be living in a banana republic.
So we the people.
Right.
I mean, that's where it goes to.
So across the country, municipalities have been ruling against the NDAA 2012. Most notable is Albany, New York. And most recently, the entire state of Idaho had passed the House, and it's now going to the Senate. Hopefully the Senate will agree with the House, and you'll have the entire state of Idaho reclaiming full due process rights. So we thought Worcester, as the second largest city in New England, and with such a rich history of standing up to authority with the 1774 Revolution and Abby Kelly Foster and Stephen Foster, were the famous abolitionists and suffragettes, that Worcester was prime to be an example of not in our city. And so we did present the resolution to the Worcester City Council. It got on the docket and was discussed, and only one councilor voted for it, Mike Gaffney. The rest of the councilors felt that, well, it's still in the Supreme Court. They were erroneously informed by our city solicitor, David Moore. It was not in the Supreme Court at that time.
They had already decided not to hear it.
Not to hear it. That didn't mean they voted against it.
Mm-hmm.
They just decided not to hear it, period.
Right.
Is there
So
any
it was not-
time they will be hearing it?
No.
So, now it would seem, so a couple of things. One, when you say bipartisan, I want to point out, this really truly is bipartisan. There are those who people would say are on the far left or the far right who
Right.
can agree on this particular issue, that there is something that is, I don't even know what a word to use, that there's just something scary
Yes.
about what
It's really
this is.
restricting our freedoms.
Yeah.
It's just a path on a direction where I don't think most Americans know that that would lead us down that
And
path.
I think
right.
that most Americans go, it can't happen here. So a lot of things going on in the world today that we say can't happen here, that all of a sudden are happening here.
Supreme Court just ruled, I think 3 weeks ago, that it was legal to detain immigrants indefinitely.
NDAA stands for?
National Defense Authorization Act. It's meant to fund the military, and it's passed every year for the past 50 plus years. And the funding expires every year. Unfortunately, they slip in policy sections that don't expire. And Section 1021 and 1022 are policy sections that do not expire.
How is this related to the Patriots Act?
Right, so
Because
it's
that
a
was
response to 9/11.
It's,
Yeah.
it's an escalation of the AUMF and the Patriot Act, and, you know, ever since 9/11. They've been chipping away at our Bill of Rights. We have hardly any Bill of Rights left, according to the laws that have passed since 9/11.
And so your response to this and this fear was creating ActNow?
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, well, we figured it was time to act now, before the rounding up starts. And so that's why we named it ActNow Worcester. We don't have a website, but we do have a YouTube and a Facebook page. And it's formed around the NDAA.
So I know you and Rich O'Coin had founded this.
Yes.
So just out of curiosity, when people talk about getting round up, and you're talking about maybe immigrants or Muslims or minorities,
Or
you guys,
homeless.
or homeless, but you don't necessarily look like you fit into those categories.
It doesn't matter.
Well, that's what my question is how are you motivated and so dedicated to a cause that maybe you are not directly affected by?
Well, I just feel like if anybody's liberties are infringed, it's a threat on all of our liberties. You know, that's the way I've always believed.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, though, because, of course, unfortunately, and I mean, and it goes back to that old saying about, when they come for you, who's going to be left if we don't stand up for
One of our
them?
T-shirts is exactly that quote
Yeah,
from the Dutch pastor.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, first they came for.
Yeah. And it really does go to show, unfortunately, that many people will stand by because you think that it doesn't affect you, or you think that nobody's coming to round me up and take me to a FEMA camp. This is way overstated. This is some sort of conspiracy theory.
Right.
That's why when you come today and talk about Albany, or you talk about Idaho, or you talk about other cities, to me, that's when people should maybe start to sit up and go, okay, well, what's going on here? Why did something that I thought or I heard maybe a little bit about and went, that doesn't sound, that must be like just something that I would hear on the internet. Is that even true? Why is Congressman McGovern, for example, going, this is something that we should be concerned with and worried about? So to bring it back full circle a little bit, and then we want to find out more about ActNow. The city council, part of what I thought the issue was that they said, hey, these are the kinds of things that we don't really talk about because we're more interested in the potholes and making sure that we are keeping litter off the streets, and those are the kinds of issues we talk about. This is an issue that, good luck to you, but talk to Jim McGovern about it. Don't talk to us about it.
Well, it's unfortunate that they feel that way when we see that other municipalities felt the need to step up. And it's also unfortunate that they feel that way considering the history of Worcester. In 1774, 4,000 residents of Worcester took to the streets armed. This is before Lexington and Concord. Took to the streets armed to close the British courts.
Yeah,
So
the
we have a
revolution started
Yeah,
here.
so it started here.
It started here, and Abby Foster, Abby Kelly Foster, and Stephen Foster, they stood up to the Slave Act. They had the Underground Railroad, and it was federal law that you could not harbor slaves, protect slaves, runaway slaves. And they said, heck with this. Whether it's federal law or not, it's wrong. And we're going to protect these people. And it was federal law that women could not vote at that time. And they said, the heck with that. I'm not paying my taxes until my wife can vote. And the city took away their house numerous times, and friends and supporters bought it back and gave it back to them. So Worcester really does have a very proud history of standing up for what's right in spite of written law.
I think that story also goes to show, unfortunately, that sometimes history comes back around to, oh, they were right. But at the time, as you and Rich and others in ActNow, I'm sure go, boy, but at this time, it must feel like you're beating your head against a wall sometimes.
Right.
What is your aim with ActNow? Like, how are you spreading the knowledge and the educating people about this problem?
Through our Facebook page, Rich was very prolific with his writings and his postings. I was pretty much just the vehicle, so I have to find my own way now that he's not here. Yeah.
But that work will go on.
It will go on. I need a breather right now, but yes, it will go on. Yes.
Do you find, specifically with the Worcester City Council, is there, and you said that Mike Gaffney was the only one who had voted for it at that time, that there is anyone on there who may want to circle back to this, who would be interested in bringing it back up?
I do believe so, but it probably is premature to name names. I think, sadly, since Rich's passing, I've spoken to a couple of them, and they're starting to see our work in a different light. So I'll work that angle and circle back to you on that.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
But I know you went on to the radio to educate people on
Yes.
the amendment rights, and want to talk a little bit about that and let
Well,
us know how that went.
We sponsored a show with Peter Blute on WCRN based on the Bill of Rights. And we just covered the Bill of Rights one right after the other, and had certain guests who were experts on those particular rights, and it was a very informative show. We pretty much relied on our guests as the experts, but that worked out very well, and I'd like to do it again.
Is that something you think we're missing in our schools today? And you're very involved in education as well, Asma, that we just don't have. It used to be civics class.
Yes.
That sounds
Yes.
so 1950s now somehow, but I don't know why it seems as if that has become an old-fashioned
Yeah.
idea. to
Kids
have
don't
civics
know
class in
how our
school.
government is set up. They don't know their rights. They don't know what procedures there are that in elections, or even like when the recent elections, most kids didn't know what an electoral college was.
Right. Right.
And it's unfortunate. We do need
Yeah.
more education in this area.
It seems as if the education system is far more interested in producing productive workers than informed citizens, whereas there was much more emphasis in past generations on raising informed citizens. And you have to wonder if they actually like a population growing up being compliant.
That individuality. When you think of Americans,
Yep.
I mean, I think that you think of rugged individualism. You know, you think of those who wanted to head west into the new frontiers, and I think that you think of the melting pot, those who came from all these different countries to make their lives here. And I think that unfortunately what you're talking about today, if true, does seem to be sort of this more of a cookie cutter, everybody can pass. Yeah, they've been talking for years now about, teaching
Right.
to the test when it
Right.
comes to MCAS.
Well,
I
it's
don't
not
want to get
just
too far
education.
afield,
I
but-
think it's also
yeah.
what you're saying is not individuality, but conforming.
Yes.
And losing the free thinking.
Right. Well, I think also you mentioned rugged individualism. That's all but dead right now. People are so dependent on the system for their everyday living, and so many people are now reliant on government for subsistence, existence, and that kind of kills rugged individualism. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Yes, it's nice to be able to be provided for, but then again, what's happening to your sense of responsibility for your own well-being? So that's a pretty.
So you've been somebody who has raised their voice, and if people are against you and the majority is against you, it hasn't deterred you. You continue to go. You continue to fight the good fight. You see signs that actually it's starting to swing around and people are taking another look at this issue that you've been talking about for all these years. Do you see among our young people, and again, we may be getting a little far afield, but do you see among our young people right now the hashtag Enough movement, whether you agree or disagree with their ultimate aim to put some sort of a ban on certain kinds of weapons or laws that they would like to see passed for gun control, the fact that they're marching, the fact that they are trying to lift their voices and raise their voices?
Well, I do like seeing the citizen involvement, definitely. But I also like all my 10 amendments, all of the Bill of Rights, So that's a slippery slope. I think when you start chipping away at rights, including the Second Amendment, it's a very slippery slope. So it's a controversial issue, and I am aware of that. I like to focus on my favorite, the Fifth Amendment. But no, I'm not
But
for.
I guess my curiosity is, we talked about how other cities and states are taking stand against NDAA. And a lot of people, I'm assuming if I told them about this, they would say, what is that and how is it affecting me? So are there cases that we can show them of how it is being used and how it is being used negatively? So because other than that, it's going to be very hard.
We just know that
for people
they can use it. And if they did use it, we wouldn't know about it.
But playing devil's advocate, right? Isn't there a stance of we're going to use it when it's necessary? We're not using it right now.
Well,
I understand it's a slippery slope. We trust our government.
They will do the right
Right,
thing.
right.
If they were to use this, it would be because they have good reason to, and they're going to put the bad guys away.
Exactly.
And
Well,
the three of
that's
us will
the
all be
way-
safe.
Yes.
that's pretty much the way the Germans thought about their government back in the 30s. So no, it's a tricky slope to say, well, whatever the government says, they know what they're doing. That's a very dangerous stance to take. It's supposed to be government of the people, by the people, for the people, not government for the government. And
I'm just saying we're going back to history to get people to understand what the slippery slope can look like.
Yes.
If we don't have hard cases to say, look, it's starting, I'm assuming it might be very difficult for people to.
Well, sadly,
you know
we
what I
may
mean?
very
It's very
I do.
difficult to
Oh,
get on
absolutely.
board.
sadly, it looks like we will have hard cases very soon with the immigrants.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right, though. In order for more people to come, if there is some sort of a rallying cry or a rallying point, something that they are outraged at, if it's all done in secrecy in the middle of the night and somebody just disappears to go off to
Right.
some camp and you don't know about it,
Right.
it is, so it's a concept, and that is, I'm sure that's been part of your problem, maybe gathering more people to your cause. Even to get the city council to revisit it and talk about it again.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it is with current history, the current events, it is beginning to seem more real to them.
Mm.
And as we know, that rally a year or so ago, Joe Petty, mayor of Worcester, said to the immigrant and refugee community, "We've got your backs."
Right.
Okay, if you've got their backs, then put it into action instead of just words. Pass this resolution.
Right, yeah, well now see that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is, because of course, I don't know, what do I know? But the way that I took it when he's talking about it, of course, with all that was in the newspapers at the time is, hey, Worcester is a sanctuary city, even though it will not officially say that it is a sanctuary
It
city.
is not a
But
sanctuary
it won't
city.
say that it will, but don't you
It's
think that
only
we give the
just
same
words. It's only just words. He's not taking any action to actually protect anybody.
But you don't think that that's what he meant, that if ICE is coming for you, we
If
will...
Yeah,
he
that's how I
meant
took it, too.
If he meant it, he would have passed the resolution or declared Worcester a sanctuary city,
But
and
see,
he
I
wouldn't
don't-
do
well,
that.
But see, I think that most see those as two separate things. So I don't think that again, here I don't want to seem as if I'm speaking for the mayor. It's just, this is how I interpreted what he said about "we've got your backs." I don't think that he would equate the NDAA and passing what you want him to pass as
equivalent-
having, yeah,
equivalent to not
as
having
being
our
there
backs.
to protect them.
Well,
He
that's
would
why
see
I
it-
said, or
Yeah.
declare it sanctuary
City.
city. But he wouldn't do that either. He talks a good talk. He needs to walk the walk. He needs to walk the walk.
Yeah.
Well, we only have a few
Yeah.
minutes left,
Yeah.
but I wanted to give you a chance to explain to us. Rich was known as the Orange Man.
Right.
And I wanted you to give us a little story behind why he was so famous for that.
As you said, Hank, it's a tough concept, this indefinite detention. It seems like conspiracy theory, it's never going to happen, not in America. The orange jumpsuit was a visual. Yes, this is what it would look like. And I did want to circle back to another thing you said, that the Worcester City Council's objection was it's a federal issue, not a local issue.
Yeah, that was my understanding, yeah.
That's what it morphed to. Their initial objection was that it was still in the Supreme Court because they were given erroneous information by City Solicitor David Moore.
That's why it seemed as if, and that was why I asked about, will they circle back to it? And you seem to indicate that maybe they can now, because once that was brought to their attention. Or do you think that what it is they said, okay, we had an easy out, hey, it's before the Supreme Court, so we won't touch it. Oh, you come back and go, you were given erroneous information, the Supreme Court's not going to ever rule on it.
Well,
And they
they're
said,
still sitting on that erroneous information because David
that's
Moore
still what
has
they say,
never
okay.
corrected it. Even though we've pointed out to him numerous times he was in error, he's never backed down from his error.
I guess what I was thinking was, they just don't, you think that for some reason they just don't want to
talk
touch
about it or touch it, yeah.
Right. For the very same reason they don't want to declare Worcester a sanctuary city. They don't want to stick their necks out.
I think we're getting
Well,
to the part
we're getting to the
gonna
part where,
hear
yeah.
your perspective on all
All
of
of
this
this.
conversation.
Well, thank you, Susan, for joining us today. I know this conversation could have lasted for a lot longer than we have. But in terms of my perspective to end the show, one of the reasons I had Susan on is when I started this as a radio show, Perspectives, after a couple months, Rich Aucoin had contacted me to become one of the sponsors for the radio show. After meeting him, I realized that he was very involved in politics and the social injustice, and got curious on what he was really using his organization for to sponsor the radio show at that time. Got to know him a little bit better, got to know Susan a little bit better, and this, unfortunately, he did pass away a couple weeks ago, and this was a show to really honor him and his work. And thank you, Susan, for really bringing some light on the issues that really everyone should know about, learn about. It's truly not a conspiracy theory if it's in writing and if it's in law, and other cities and municipalities are taking a stand against it. And I hope, since Worcester does have a rich history, as we learned with Susan, that we do take that history back and do it again, and do it more in the future. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you join us again.